All right, welcome everybody. We are going to kick off in just a minute or two. Just want to let everybody know that we are being recorded today for folks that are going to view this later. And hold on, I'm going to turn off our waiting room so everyone can get in. All right, you are all here from all over the world, which is amazing. That's great to see so many faces here today. I'm going to let David get us started, and we'll get into the content very quickly.
All right, greetings everyone. Hi, my name's David Colarusso. I'm the director of the Legal Innovation Lab here at Suffolk, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our first Document Assembly Line Bootcamp. We'll talk more about what the Document Assembly Line is in a moment, but today's going to be an interactive situation. You may hear my daughter in the background, but we want you all to be able to do things as well. So first thing I want to do is just make sure that everyone was able to sign into their Teams account. So when you registered, you should have been sent an invite for the DocAssemble server and also for Teams. And the reason why this is super important is because we are going to, throughout the course of today, ask you to take your screen, split it between a browser where you'll be doing some work and a video where we'll be talking. And we're going to ask you to go through some processes. So, that will include downloading files or maybe sharing code snippets in a Teams window. So we want to make sure that everyone has that ability. So what I'm going to do now is I also have the magical power to be able to, if you aren't on Teams for some reason, to add you. So if you are for some reason not on Teams or did not receive an invite, you can use the chat, and you can just do a direct message to me with your email. And while Quentin is then explaining more stuff, I will make sure that we get you a Teams invite and that it goes to you. So if you are not on Teams, DM me in the chat with your email and what you would like your name to be in the Teams channel, and I will then add you to Teams during our subsequent work here. But mostly it's just me welcoming you, and we're excited to have you. And Abigail welcomes you as well. That's my daughter. All right, you can probably go in the background. All right, to you, Quentin.
Just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a roadmap of where we are. So just tell you a little bit about who we are, give you an overview of the project and what we're going to do, we're hoping people will treat these next 4 weeks of this boot camp. And then we're going to jump right into two substantive pieces today. We're going to go over how to label a PDF using our AssemblyLine process. And then we are going to take a short break, depending on how much content we've gotten through. And then we're going to run a PDF through our Weaver. That's the process where we actually create a draft interview based on the information that you chose in your labels, and you get a chance to assign them prompts and create a draft of an interview. So because we're such a big group, we can't do the usual thing of going around and having everybody introduce themselves. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are, and then a little bit about who each of you are from the information you gave us in advance. Before I do that, though, I just want to talk a little bit about what our teaching goals are. So we are hoping today to get you ready to duplicate our process of the assembly line. What that means is you'll be ready essentially from start to finish to know how to organize a team, how to organize project management techniques to replicate what we did to create court forms online. And you will also learn how to get a form from the beginning to the end of that process. So we're going to concentrate at the beginning of this 4 weeks on some of the mechanics of running a form through the process, which is exactly what an end user has been doing, rather a member or volunteer of our team has been doing throughout these last 9 months. And then towards the end of the week, the last week mostly, we'll spend about an hour, about half of the time that day to help you get set up with your own copy of our process. And we'll go over some of the things you can do to customize our code to make it look more like what you need for your jurisdiction during that time as well. So I know folks join for a lot of different reasons, and you are all welcome. But that is our main teaching objective today. We're going to be probably helping you learn a little bit of DocAssemble. You learn enough. We did not intend or expect to create every member or volunteer of our team to turn them into a DocAssemble expert, and you don't need to get to the end of getting a form from start to finish. So that is not one of our goals, but it's something that you may get out of these next few weeks. And we also did not set up the bootcamp to help you decide if you wanted to use DocAssemble for your project, right? And I think that's a goal that some of you have, which you certainly can get out of these next few weeks, but it's not the explicit goal that we have going in. All right. I also want to just kind of warn you that a lot of our processes, a lot of the tools that we're building are very much under construction. Actually, just in the last month, we made some tremendous changes to our AssemblyLine which is that tool that creates your draft document for you. So if you're viewing this in a few months or maybe even a few weeks, you might see some changes. I think they won't be ones that really fundamentally affect the value of this content, but some specific details might be a little bit different. And I do feel pretty confident that things won't break, but that is also something you have to be aware of, that we were building the tracks ahead of us during the pandemic while we were on the train. And some things might still be like that, but very much less so than they were back in April when we first began. All right, so who we are. This is kind of a sampling or a subset of the folks who made up our volunteer team and helped contribute in really meaningful ways to our project. We're run out of the Suffolk University Law School's Legal Innovation and Technology Lab. David, who spoke first, is our director. That represents the paid full-time employees, but we had people from all different kinds of institutions and volunteers from around the world who participated as well. You'll get to meet some of those today. Who you are. Since you can't introduce yourselves, it just wouldn't be a good use of our time right now. I want to just show you a little bit of what we learned from the survey that we sent out to you all before you joined. A plurality of you have used DocAssemble in some form, which is great and something we didn't count on or expect, and it's not necessary for you to have done that in advance. Again, a plurality of you have used some kind of document assembly platform before, but there's a good chunk of you who haven't, which is totally okay. We're going to focus on our very specific tooling, but you'll get some experience and familiarity, and it's okay if you have not done that before. So many different kinds of job roles that you all have, which is great to see people from all different areas. We really tried to emphasize the value of having an interdisciplinary team to be able to accelerate our work. And I think that's a really important model to keep. And you certainly exemplify that. I'll go through the pages and you can see some of the different job roles that people describe themselves as having. Plenty of attorneys, plenty of people on the IT side, people from academia, people from who own their own businesses automating forms, and people who just participate in different ways in that process, running websites, people who direct institutions as well. Okay. Not quite half of you actually expect to use DocAssemble within the next year or are currently using DocAssemble, which is fine too. Like I said, some of you might be using this as a learning tool to help you decide, or just play around with it now and then see what happens in the future. So you're in company there, if that's your goal. And you come from all over the world, 4 different continents, all over the United States, certainly well represented, folks from the East and West Coast and in the middle, the Midwest. And then we have some folks from Europe, Australia, and South Africa. A good contingent from South Africa, the only folks from African continent who are here today. So I'm excited to have you join as well. Okay, so jumping into our project, giving you a little bit of a framing for what our project is and how it works at a technical level. We won't go into that in too much depth, but obviously you all know, I think, and this is a main motivating fact for a lot of you, is we use DocAssemble. That's our stack. That is the tool that we use to automate all of our forms. Then very much a lot of what made our project successful is the use of Kanban. And we happen to select Trello. We'll go over our Trello boards. later, and you'll get to have a copy and get to experiment and see if those work for you. And a really important part of that was the use of checklists. So we actually sat down and added even more checklists over the last few weeks. Michelle, who's one of our longtime participants, can't just call that just volunteer because of the role and the amount of time she spent on the project. It's much more than that. I think we have about 300 checklists. Is that right? Checklist items. So that's very prescriptive, but you can use them for how you value them. But what we have found is really helpful about the checklist is you know exactly what to do next. You can jump in, see what was done, what wasn't done, and advance a form, whether you have like a day to participate, an hour to participate, or a month. And that was really valuable for our volunteers when they jumped in to know right away what to do next. And then we today are going to get to experiment with the ALWeaver, which is a tool that takes a Word document or PDF and turns it into a draft of an interview. And that's the tool that we have built over the last 9 months, sporadically in bursts to change and add new features that we thought were important. So here's the process of taking a form from start to finish. Basically, you go through labeling a form, you automate a draft, and then you edit and refine that draft. So very much in keeping with that cycle of iteration, this is where a lot of the work happens on the last red arrow here. We'll get through steps 1 and 2 today, and there's certainly a lot of time to spend refining those, but we'll get you to get your feet wet with both of those parts today. And in the next few weeks, each week we expect to have at least an hour set aside for breakout groups. We'll see how that works. You know, this itself is a work in progress, how we're doing this boot camp. So we might find we need to spend more time on something than we expected. But I feel pretty confident that you'll get some breakout group rooms every other week. This week, I don't think we will have that time. So we're going to be using other tools to allow you to get more one-on-one attention or feedback or a chance to talk with each other. So those are all things that I think you'd get in person and that we're going to try to give you lots of different ways to achieve. So what is the Weaver? I mentioned it a few times now, but you might have no idea what it is. I think this is a useful way to think of it if you have come from a coding background, which some of you do. Some of you had that prior coding experience, and that's why you came here. It's a little bit like Ruby on Rails for DocAssemble. We're really focused on templatizing the process of automating a form. So we made basically a very opinionated, specific process what lets you very quickly automate a court form in Massachusetts. And what we have tried to do, a lot of our work over the last month, was making that more flexible so that it works whether you're in Massachusetts or any state or any country in the world. And I think we've done fairly well at setting that groundwork up for you. And we really wanted to save you from having to make very routine choices over and over and over again, to the level of how you ask certain questions. That itself is automated. So if you have questions about a person's name or address or whether they appear on the form or not, we have some questions that are used and shared by all of our interviews that are written a way that we've tested and validated and have the ability to translate multiple times into multiple languages that exist. And you don't get asked to create those questions. They're already done for you. That's a really important part of our process. Another part of it is the overall structure of your interview. So you get from beginning to the end of an interview, you have an introduction screen, you have a series of questions, you have a chance for someone to add a signature, and then finally you have a chance to download your form. In our state, we've had a number of forms where you have the ability to then deliver it to a court by email. Bryce, who's one of our team members, was hired to help us add the ability to have you e-file that with the court. So it be sent directly to their case management system. That is also part of the process. So there are all of these steps of a form going beginning to end. They're not part of DocAssemble, right? Like they're not everything you would want to automate with DocAssemble uses these features, but our Weaver tool helps you get all of those in place. So again, think of it as like a template for a court form that goes through all of those steps and has all of those procedures along the way to be able to get to the court at the end of the process. Or download it, which happens with a lot of our forms as well. The email part is not built in to every form, but some of our forms needed that. So it's part of what the Weaver will help you with. Okay. So because I think not all of you have seen the output, I'm going to do like a really quick share so you can see what that looks like. And I'll choose just like a really simple form. And let me share that again with you all. Okay, so I'm going to choose the right thing. Here we go. The content is looking okay. Do you? All right. So I think you should all see court forms online here. It didn't show up in my preview, but oh, I see why. Hold on, let me do a new share. Okay, sharing the wrong thing. All right, so this is our website. This is our front end. When I say we'll help you build your own court forms online, actually, this is all open source too, but we're not really going to focus on the front end. We're focusing on the individual forms and how those work and how you can build a library of forms that share all those different parts of the process. Let's do one that's very short. So you can see, well, what do you get from having this Weaver tool to help you build your forms and using our rigid framework? Obviously, you get fewer choices than building something from scratch, but I think the time trade-off is exactly worth it. So this form, you can see here, we've built a way for an interface for people to switch from languages from English to Spanish. We have built this thing that every form is going to need, which is a chance to have a terms of use that the user accepts and before they can continue. We have this language bar turned on, which reads the screen aloud. We have this prompt to sign in or register, which is every interview shares, and then also the feedback survey and every interview shares. So this actually takes you to, let's try this. So I'm a user, I found a bug on any screen of the interview. It's going to tell me what screen it is. And I'm going to give a very bad bug report here. And it actually creates a GitHub issue that is tied to the specific form that the person was working on. So that in itself has like a lot of value for us to be able to track problems and to be able to get feedback from users in place and have a little bit of structure to how they provide us that feedback. And they don't need to have a GitHub account, obviously, to do that. Okay. Let's get through to the end. So a lot of these are built, individually, but let's see. I have to concentrate to make sure I choose the right options here. And what I wanted to show you is just like, we get to the end of the interview, what do we get? So this address auto-completion is built, it's connected to Google's address auto-completion feature, the same one that you use on Google Maps. And that was a really helpful thing for folks to be able to get address validation and to avoid user error. You might find people type their zip code wrong or some other typo, or they maybe use a neighborhood name rather than the city name when they shouldn't. And this will help avoid those kind of errors. I'm not showing you here our court selector. I just realized that because this form is national. It doesn't require you using a court. But that's not going to be relevant to most of you because you're not in Massachusetts and our court selector only works in Massachusetts. Okay, so the preview screen, this is something that we've built as well for every form and have tooling around. So when you get to this point of the interview, you'll see a version of the form that doesn't have a signature yet, so the person can validate it and make sure there's any mistakes they want to correct. They can correct them before they continue. Then that form has a certification that you're signing under oath. Not every form needs that. But here you can then send your form to be signed by somebody else. Maybe you have an attorney who worked on the form working with the client, but the client needs to sign it. So this is a chance to do a handoff from attorney to client, and they could send that by text message. So I won't actually do that now. I'll just show you what the signature screen looks like. This is where you add a signature. This could, obviously, you would normally want to do this by using your finger, perhaps, on a phone. You could draw a much more accurate signature, but if you needed to use the computer, you can do that. And let's keep going. So you'll see this is actually something that we've redesigned here, this ending screen. This one happens to let you send it to your landlord because that's an important function. But we have a redesigned interface here for downloading and viewing a completed form and sending it by email to an arbitrary address. But this is the basics of what it is. So here you can see we've now added our signature to the form and it's there. Okay, so that is the basics of what it does, the basics of what our tooling is and why we, hopefully it will make some sense why we chose some of that tooling. And I'm going to go back to just the last couple slides here. We're just about finished with the preamble. Okay. And let's see, I did the demo. So how we expect you and hope you can use the bootcamp. During live sessions, we're going to be really relying on Teams to share code, so it's persistent. So do make sure you're on the Teams. For those of you who joined a little bit later, you can message David Colarusso with your email to ask to have an invite to the Teams if you don't have one yet. Follow along on your computer. We'll try to use the Teams for questions too, so that will be monitored and moderated to pop those up, but just because I think the size, it'll be hard to do it another way. Today, as I said, in future weeks, we'll have breakout rooms to help give some of that structure. And if you don't have a second monitor, I recommend when we get to the next part, which is about to start, arrange Zoom so it uses about half of your screen, so you can still view what we're doing, and use your other half of the screen to actually have the code, that whatever process we're working on, to be able to see that in a web browser at the same time that you can see Zoom on the other half of your screen. Yeah, ask even more questions in the breakout rooms in the next few weeks, but today we won't have as much time for that. We won't have that time at all, actually. So just use the Zoom or Zoom chat if you can't get on Teams, but preferably the Teams chat so that your questions will be saved after the Zoom session is over. In between sessions, and some of you are going to be viewing this as a recording, so this will be especially relevant to you. Use Teams to get to know each other, and you know, hopefully we can kind of have a community forming around these tools. That's our goal. Our hope is to help replicate it and to everyone be able to share and improve the tools. Ask questions on the coding help channel is a good place, or bootcamp, wherever you find it. I mean, we're not going to police your use of channels at all. We just encourage you to ask them, but that's a good place to ask them. We will try to give you a little bit of independent homework every week. It won't necessarily stop you from being able to learn the next time you come in, but it'll be helpful for you. Use this rule. If you are trying to do something for more than 30 minutes and you can't solve it, definitely ask for help at that point. Don't try to solve it on your own. Maybe you'll find we have a really quick, easy answer that lets you get onto a much more interesting part of whatever you were trying to work on. Maybe you'll find that there was a bug, and no matter what you did, you wouldn't have been able to do it on your own. So don't try to do something for more than 30 minutes without making progress. I also encourage you to use the DocAssemble Slack and the DocAssemble documentation as another place to ask questions. And every week we have a live hour for help, which is on Tuesdays, 1 p.m. EST. So that is another place where you can ask for help. And we'll have all of those links on the bootcamp channel or on our website page. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for any questions that came up, and I'll ask someone on our team to moderate them from the chat or from Teams, probably, if they did come up. Okay, well, I guess that we were just super efficient. That's probably not true. You can ask questions later.
And I would say at this point, if we're going to have any chat discussion, they should go over to the Teams channel for general. That way we'll have a record of them. So the nice thing is that everything will stay there and we'll always be able to reference those. I think I've got just about everyone over onto Teams, so.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. Well, now I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to, and Maeve, who are going to lead us in our first live learning exercise.
All right, and I'm just gonna ask. I'm dealing with someone on an issue right now. I'm just gonna ask them to ping Bryce, and they can help with that because obviously now I'm doing this. All right, you already know me. Maeve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm.
And you're on Spotlight there. Oh no, okay, no, never mind. Maeve, go ahead.
So I'm from South Africa, and I joined the project in March April last year when it started. And kind of I was actively involved for until about September, and then I started my role at Radiant. And I see that we've got Christian and Bella, who are also at Radiant, on the call today. And so I've been involved kind of like at the start, I was involved in the labeling, which is what I'm going to take you through today. And then Lance and I have actually created our own interview. So I think I've been involved start to finish. I think that's what I could say, right, David? Yeah.
Yes, since the very, very beginning.
Okay.
And that gave me enough time to add a little message to the chat. So there you will find a PDF to download and a website to visit. And so what we're going to ask now is, this is sort of the user interaction portion of our events. So we're going to look for one brave volunteer who would like to share their screen, and we will help walk you through this labeling process while others watch and follow along on their own. So it might go a little slow here as we make sure we get everyone to the same page, to the same spot, but I think now everyone should be on Teams. Is that correct? Is there anyone who is not on Teams and cannot access those documents?
I'm not.
I am not too.
All right. In those cases, then, Bryce, do you have the ability to add people to Teams? Yeah. So if you could DM Bryce your email address, and then he'll endeavor to get you onto Teams to get you there. One nice thing is we are recording all this, so hopefully we can catch back up. Well, I think we'll go ahead while that's being worked on. So because we got 2 people out of 50, not bad, not bad. All right, but we will get you there. Don't worry, no one left behind. Okay, maybe just a little delayed. We'll get there. Okay, so in that case, then, do we have a brave volunteer? Oh, and Maeve had a great solution, which is she uploaded the file to the Zoom chat, so you can access it there. So actually, you can be doing that. Good thinking, Maeve.
Josh prompted me, so that wasn't my.
while we do that, so great idea there. And then also, if you could also drop in the document link. So what we're going to do is, one of the ways that you can start these forms is by starting with a PDF or some type of source document. And Quentin talked a little about that. So we're going to go through and we're going to take a source document. We're going to label it in such a way that our Weaver is going to be able to take the document and save you a little time down the road. So was that enough time to get someone's bravery up to be the volunteer? Should have put a ringer in the audience.
That's what I was just thinking.
If there isn't anyone, I'm prepared to share my screen, but really, no one?
Maybe yeah, hi, Camilla. I'm happy to.
Yes, Camilla.
Great, Camilla.
I knew we'd get somebody.
Brave soul.
All right.
Well done. Okay,
Jennifer
Camilla.
just nominated Amanda. That's just throwing her under the bus. Camilla, you saved Amanda there. Okay, Camilla.
All right, happy Amanda. So do I actually need to unlock the form first, or
no?
Can
we're gonna start you from beginning. Now let me just make sure you can. Do you have the ability to share your screen?
Yeah, hang on one second.
All right. Okay. So everyone, yes, yep. Great. Okay. So Camilla is showing us the form as it looks if you were just to download it. And what we want to do is, so you might be getting this form, you might have produced this form yourself, you might be getting it from the court. There might be several different ways you have happened upon this. And we're only going to have time today to deal with a PDF but you can do something analogous using a docx. And so we'll flag as we go through what would be some of the differences. Obviously, the main difference is in a docx, you don't have these sort of fillable fields. And you might not have these fillable fields in a PDF. So, but you can see sort of those light blue things. If you click in there, Camilla, that would be, you know, right where someone would type something, okay? So you might not have those, you want to add them. Or you might have them and you need to make sure they're gonna work with our Weaver. So Camilla, if you could go ahead and open up the link, the document link that was also in the chat in another window. And then we're gonna upload this PDF file to that. So if you haven't saved this locally, oh, it looks like you have because you opened it in Adobe.
Yeah.
So
I'm dropping it in.
Great. And we're only seeing.
Do you want to see my whole?
Yeah, you want to see your web browser. Yeah.
Okay, hang on one second. My apologies.
Oh, no worries. You were very brave to share your desktop.
I know, you never know what you might see.
You always got to ask. You got to prepare people. You know, make sure you close the tabs you don't want us to see.
Hang on one second. I've got two screens, so that's my problem. So let me go to screen 2. You'll see everything. Let me go here.
And the first thing to be clear on is that the process we're talking about here. So here we have the document tool. This is the PDF unlocker tool. Camilla also had it seemed like she had maybe a pro version of Adobe. You could also do great. You could also do this there, but a lot of people don't have the pro version of Adobe. So we're going to walk through the document tool as something that's accessible to everyone as a way to do these same processes. So,
so what I did actually, this was the first screen I saw, and I just dragged the file and dropped it here.
Perfect, perfect. And everyone else should do the same.
Okay, so I'm just gonna take over from David quickly. Basically, this can be beneficial for 2 reasons, right? Because sometimes you might find that the PDF you want to edit is locked for editing, and you can't create those form fields. So this is a tool which you can use, which is currently unable to do in Adobe. So you want to select the checkbox there. I promise that I have the right to unlock. And then you can unlock and rename these fields. Okay, I see David is back. David, do you want to take over again, or no?
You're doing a great job. I have a 2-year-old here who is having yes.
Okay, so basically the first thing here is you'll see that there's certain kind of suggested names within those fillable fields. So you're going to want to go to, okay, I don't have annotate over here, but you see, maybe Quentin, if I could ask you to annotate, I think you might have access, where it says field names and there's a drop down that says choose option.
Yep, let me just grab the annotation.
Oh, you've got it. Okay, perfect. So now you're going to want to say original PDF field name. It's the second from the bottom. And you'll see that it switches to what our field names actually are. The screen is a little bit small. Do you mind just making this a full size, I think?
Yeah, hang on
my old eyes.
And hopefully everyone who's following along has a version of their own, so they actually can see the high fidelity is a hope.
Yeah. Okay, so now you have what we've been using as a naming convention. There is a link in the chat in Teams that, okay, the annotation is turned off. There's a link in Teams which provides you with the naming convention. I'm just going to talk a little bit about that naming convention. Essentially, as Quentin said, we're kind of building this plane as we fly it. So over the last year, we created a convention that will assist in identifying variables when you're, either in docx or PDF. You can learn more about the way in which you want to use variables by going to that page. But there's 2 or 3 aspects that I just wanted to highlight. So there's a couple of distinctions between docx and PDF. With a PDF,
and it might be worth doing the screen share on that document as well. So
maybe I just
if you have that, I just dropped the link in the Teams, but I can also drop it in the Zoom chat.
Shall I stop sharing, or
if you just wanted to share that screen?
Yeah, hang on one second.
There you go. Great. And if you scroll down, then we can use that as a guide.
This one?
Yeah, there we go.
So
I think
seeing
Maeve is
mine.
actually sharing her screen right now, just so we're not confused. Both of those are okay.
Okay.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
That's fine. Maybe sharing her screen, and that's fine. So then she can easily talk about what she's seeing. So.
Okay, so basically a lot of forms have the same kind of fields, names of users, names of defendants, dates, that kind of thing, addresses. So we've created this naming convention. So here you'll see the one that we're going to be using for the PDF are under this column. It's not hard and fast. You can use, you can kind of create your own. We haven't provided names for every single variable that you're going to have to create. So this is the prefix area, right? So you're dealing with the user. You move down here to look at the suffix area, and that's where you're going to add in the parts of the user's name. So for example, if there's different blocks for first and middle name, then you're going to want to separate that out by breaking down the variable. The way that we've organized it is kind of overarching group to smallest group. I don't know how to say this nicely, but basically you can see we don't say parent name, parent first name. We want to group everything by parent, and then group everything by name, and then group everything by first. So it goes in that kind of order of operations. And that's true for everything here. So you can see here we did it again, address, 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 and then you go into the smaller category that would follow that. Is there anything, multiples? So when you're dealing with PDFs, Adobe doesn't allow you to have multiples, the same variable twice. The way that we've gotten around this is by adding 2 underscores followed by a number. So for example, if you have to use this variable twice, you would say parent name full underscore underscore 1. And then in the second instance that you would use it, you would change that number to 2. This issue doesn't arise within docx. You can use the same variable a number of times. The other difference that I think Quentin didn't mention with docx and PDF is PDF fields are fixed. So there's going to be a limit on how much text you can put in those fields. Within a docx, it adjusts. There's a fancy word for that, right, Quentin?
Well, just like it expands to fill whatever. That's what you mean, right, Maeve? I think.
Yeah. So the difference between using PDF and docx, those are the kind of 2 major differences that we could come up with right now. I think, is there anything else that we need to add on the variables, or are we going to leave people to go and read that?
I think what we're going to do now is make it more concrete by asking Camilla to share her screen again, and we'll actually name some of the variables, and we'll model for you how you would think about doing some of that. And then everyone also can put fingers to keyboard and do the same. So Camilla, if you could share that screen again.
Yes, indeed. Oh,
thanks for being such a trooper here.
No worries.
And then the important thing to recognize is the reason why we're going through this. So a couple of important things to realize. One, if you don't end up using the naming convention or you get something wrong, the worst that is going to happen is you're going to give yourself some more work to do down the road. The key about using these naming conventions is that the Weaver is going to be able to take them and infer what you meant about these variables from the way you named them. So for example, if you name something underscore date, it's going to recognize it's a date. So when it puts together its first draft of the interview, it's going to present that thing as a date field and allow people to treat it as such as opposed to a text field.
It's hanging on my end. I don't know.
On your end?
Yeah, hang on one second.
That's okay. So the motivation here is really that you do a little bit of work now and thinking about how things are structured to save yourself time down the road, so that the Weaver is going to be able to sort of, like I said, infer the behavior of that field. And some of that is things such as, structuring that these are attributes about the field. So like a person, their name has a first part, a second part, etc. Or an address, and there's, the first line, the second line, etc. A person might also have a birthday. A person might have that. You can imagine a bunch of different things. And then by using this convention with the underscores in the PDF, these suffixes, it will create these attributes, which will then be easily accessible and help save you time in the future. And Camilla, if that's hanging, I can go ahead and do share my screen here.
Yeah, sorry.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. So here I am at the PDF editor. I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing we just did, which was upload the form that everyone has. And please do feel free to follow along. And is everyone seeing my, do you see my full screen or just my browser?
Just your browser window.
Okay, great. Okay, so the important thing
You want
to
to
realize,
choose the option and,
yep.
and, oh, sorry.
Yeah. So the important thing to realize is here, you might get a form that's not this form that doesn't even have any fields on it. So what we did is we sort of pre-baked part of this, and that we added some fields here, so that all we're going to do today is just add 3 fields. If you got this form and it wasn't a fillable PDF, you might have to add all of these fields, but we just wanted to sort of make that a little easier. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you're on the original PDF names. And an important thing to realize here is that depending upon what viewer you're looking at and sort of what attribute of the field you're looking at, there are like 3 different things that could be associated with the field. There's the field text, the stuff that someone actually might type in, right? That's not what we're looking at. There's the field name, which is what we're actually looking at now. And then there's also the option to do like a field hint, which is like hint text to help people decide what to put in there. So you want to make sure here in this tool, at least, that you're looking at the original PDF field name from this drop down, because that will actually show you the variable name that is associated with the field. And that's the thing that's really important. So you can see here that we have a division for the trial. So there's a trial court, and then it has a division. And you can see it's a suffix here under division. So let's just think about what we need to, you can see here we have a docket, and a docket has a thing called a number. We have a motion with a thing called a name. And then we have plaintiffs and defendants. The folks over in this list here, you will see things listed here, and you can use this as a reference, that the Weaver will always know and always understand. But there's no expectation that this is a universal list of variables. It's enough to help you understand the conventions that you can write something the Weaver will understand. And one thing that we always should say is this is like drinking from a fire hose. As Quentin made clear earlier, the expectation is not that we get out of the boot camp with you knowing everything. It's that you know enough to get what you need, which is to say, it's sort of an on-ramp to the community. So being able to access things in the Teams channel like other people and be able to ask questions and that sort of thing. That being said, let's add some fields. Let's get to it. So I have my original things here, my original field names selected here, so I can see what things are named. I'm going to add a text field. So I'm going to click on text box here, and I'm just going to click right over here. It sort of threw it there. It's not where I want it. I want to put it here. Now comes, and any thoughts on what we might call this variable here? Now comes. So this is the use case here is we have a general motion for the probate and family court here in Massachusetts. And someone's coming forward to do something. So what might we call this user? And feel free to unmute and just talk. If someone's in the chat and can see something, they can share that with me. One of the sort of primary users, sort of like things that might come up across here is just the notion of having a user. So someone's filling out this form. We're going to assume the person filling out this form is this person here coming before you. Now we recognize that sometimes it actually might be someone filling this out on the behalf of, say, the litigant. We still tend to think about the user as the person for whom who is filling out the form. So it's sort of the form user, even though the person who at some point might be working on this document might be someone with a relation to them. So we're going to have user, and the user has something called a name, right? And so if we do user_name, this will allow us to get at a user's name. So everyone can just go ahead, click that add text box, put that in there, name it username. And then we're going to do the same thing to this big field here. And what we're going to want to do though is make sure that this then covers this area. So we can take it, we can drag it horizontally, we can drag it vertically to fill that space. And then this is going to be what the user wants. Here we have in this action, who requests. So I'm just going to call it user underscore request. Now, oops, I didn't put my underscore. There's no, the Weaver doesn't understand that there's like a, it's not like we have a preloaded thing that's called request attribute. I believe it's what it's doing is it's understanding that by using a suffix, I'm telling it to create an attribute. And then we have one third field we're going to make. Here we're going to click a different button than we did these last 2 times. We want to put a signature. Signatures are special. And as you can see here, checkboxes are special too, but signatures are special. So I'm going to click the signature button. And I now have a thing I can put a signature. I'll click and again, drag it to the appropriate place. And now, after having done this twice, any guesses as to what I might name this?
User signature?
Yeah, user underscore signature. Now this is a that is a special name that the that will have significance. That's going to so some of these things are unique names. So things like signature, just like we talked about if you did underscore date. Some of these things are if you had done underscore date, it's going to know date. And in this case, we know it's a signature. Okay. And so we now have this. So we have something that has, we've added 3 fields, a user name, a user underscore name, user underscore request, and user underscore signature. We now, what we can do after we've done that, we would have done this for the entire form, but as you can see, we sort of pre-baked this. When you're done, all you do is you finish and download. And it's going to allow you, I don't think you can see my save button, but I'm just going to save this. It'll allow you to save this. So everyone should now be at the point where you can say, I'm going to give it a different name than the name I have there now. I'll say it filled in, or let's call it filled there. So now I've saved that. And now it's that document that you're going to use to run through the Weaver. Let's pause a moment and let's see if everyone can sort of catch up to that. And if you're having problems with something, let us know and let's see if we can just really quickly troubleshoot those.
And I will say, I think we're really quite good on time. So.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah. Would Quentin? We didn't discuss it explicitly. Do you want us to run it through the checker now before you run it through the Weaver? Then, since we have time, we can show them how to do the checker.
Yeah, I just realized we hadn't talked about that, but it seems like a really nice thing to do.
Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen again, and here is the documentation for the this documentation page is available in Teams under the I think it says bootcamp web. And what it does is it actually puts you here on this page, on this bootcamp page. What we're going to do every week is we will update this. So we sort of guessed about the things we were talking about and tried to put in the links. We'll go back after we've done the session, make sure the links here reflect what we actually talked about, provide a link to a video of the session so that you can see it. And then you can get a light sense of where we're going with the additional weeks, but those will flesh out as we hit them and have resources, primarily the videos and to link back to. But what I'm going to draw your attention to right now is just this ALWeaver overview. And this sort of goes through the same stuff we just talked about. So this is the key, even though this feels like a fire hose, we're building the documentation along with this, and we're going to try to give you all the scaffolding you need. So here we're talking about using the Weaver. The first thing is that we've got, and we lost someone, but they'll come back in a sec. Luckily, we're videoing. Here is a link to those conventions, right? So that gives you those conventions we were talking about. Here is a link to a section that talks a little bit about adding labels. I think we're going to replace this video with probably a snippet of the video we just did, or maybe even this part right now, because this is documents 1, and it talks about some stuff with document that is not relevant. But what is here is you have a link to the document editor. So this is where you could find the document that we just worked with. I'm just doing this by way of showing you that there's documentation that encompasses what we just talked about. So it tells you how to label it. And then there's this link here for checking your labels. If you click on that, it will bring you to the PDF pre-flight checker, okay? And what you can do here is you can, and I'll allow time for everyone to be following along with this. So what I should really do is make sure that this link is in so there's a link to the pre-flight checker. Okay, I'm having a request for milk. So I'm gonna maybe let Maeve take that over. The idea is here it comes to the pre-flight checker. You can check so I put the link there to this page. If you check your labels, you get to the pre-flight checker. You can upload your file. I'm gonna use this filled one. That's the one that I had just added the things to. And then if you run through this, what it's gonna do is it's gonna tell you what variables it thinks it sees. And it's gonna give you some indication of sort of ones that it sort of understood. So it understood what a plaintiff and a defendant was, what a docket number was, what a trial court division was, a username, user signature, signature date, all these other things. It understood those. There were some things in here that it didn't already know, and that's fine. The key is that these things that it knows are going to make it easier to work through. Milk in the orange cup. Can you wait just a moment? Yeah. And this is going to run. And then here you can see actually your output, and it actually filled in the signature, and it added something that looks a little different than what you had written there. But the fact is you can see that it's sort of new things, filled them out. And I'll let Maeve, if she wants to say any more about that, she can. Well, I get milk in the orange cup, right?
I don't think there's anything more to add on the pre-flight checker. Does anybody have any questions at this stage, or anything that we can troubleshoot?
Should we be concerned that it's not recognizing certain fields? It doesn't have, you know, the hearing city is blank. It doesn't necessarily recognize that. Is that an issue?
No. Quentin, can you speak to that?
So Jeff, are you saying, so here, oh, now I do see annotate. I'm not sure why I didn't see it before. So maybe that was wrong. So is this here, Jeff, do you see, is this what you meant? Because I think that might just be that they're left aligned.
I just, yeah, it maybe, I'm in the checker and it's.
But it didn't highlight them in bold is what you meant.
Right.
Yeah. No, that just means it's a variable that you created that wasn't already handled by us. So you saw in this form about half of the fields used a built-in question. So the author won't be asked to write those questions. But these are ones that we didn't pre-anticipate the definition of, so, which is normal. Every interview, you're going to have something unique on it. Otherwise, it probably wasn't something you were going to automate.
Yeah, and the notion is that the ones that it knows are just, it's going to be able to save you time there. So if it's an address, it's going to know it's an address. It's going to automatically do that nice feature Quentin showed where it checks with Google to do the address correct. If it's a date, it's going to show it as a date. If it's a name and you associate it as or if it's a person and you've associated it with some suffix, even if we didn't know what it was, those suffixes will be related to the sort of the parent. For those of you with programming background, we could get into the whole discussion of objects. But for those of you without, the notion is that you have this sort of base root, and then you can add these suffixes to it, which will provide attributes of that. For the PDF version, you can see everything in the naming convention. One special distinction between PDFs and if you were to do this in docx. In docx, instead of doing this whole name field, putting it up to document, you're just going to go in and you're going to put things inside a set of curly brackets, and you're going to put the variable name there. The naming convention is slightly different there, and that's reflected on the variable quick reference as well. And again, we're going to make sure links to all of these things are clear and in the Teams channel. And of course you can, and Michelle has given an example in the Zoom, although I suggest we do it in the in the Teams so that it was persistent. But yes, so that's that.
Are there any other things that we can troubleshoot? Any other questions that we can answer?
Yeah. So the question I want to ask is, was everyone able to get something that they downloaded and ran through the pre-flight, and now they have something that has a fake signature on it that they were able to see? Is there anyone who was not able to get that point and needs some troubleshooting? And of course, the thing I'm going to ask you is to share your screen, Amanda, if you have it.
Yeah, sure. I just keep getting timed out. I don't know if it's my internet or.
Oh, we might have overloaded something.
Yeah,
maybe everyone doing it at the same
This is a
moment.
good test for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got
we'll give
that
people a
too.
link on a different server where they could run the same exact process.
So I was able to get through it, but the document that I got at the end does not have the fake signature on it.
Okay, so that might mean so the first thing I would do there is check to see in the variable names if it was actually called user_signature, or if maybe there was off by a character or something. And then the other thing I would check is to make sure that that signature, when you added it, you added the signature field as opposed to a text field, because those are two distinct fields. So when you're in the document creator, or if you were in Adobe Pro, there's a difference between adding a text field and a signature field.
I think I made the same error. I used a text box and called it user signature rather than using the signature field and calling it user signature.
I think
That's
mine's
a
misspelling, because I definitely used the signature field, but it's still not showing.
Well, you see, that's great, because now Jeff and Jack, you've presented two of the very common things that can go wrong, right? And I mean, I think a lot of the folks on this call are familiar with how touchy computers are. Maybe some aren't. I like to talk to my law students and tell them it's like having the pickiest journal editor that you ever had. Like, if you don't have two spaces after the period, it's just going to yell at you and be like, I can't even read this. That is exactly what the computer will do. If you're off by a character or something, it's not going to work the way you want. The nice thing about this variable bit is, as we just touched upon, if it doesn't know what something is, all you've done is it just means there's going to be more work down the road. It hasn't been able to pre-impute what you meant to it. So it would be, in this case, worth going back and rerunning it through again and making sure you use signature or corrected a spelling. But if it was one of these other variables, as we were just talking about, like, is it okay if it doesn't recognize them? Yeah, a lot of things it's not going to be able to recognize, but it's all just about getting you a little closer to the finish line. And I think that probably sums up what we wanted to talk about there. The other things to think about, and these are talked about in the tools to edit PDFs as well. That's the page where you found the document thing. Is how to delete pages from PDFs. And then sometimes you'll get something that's like an Adobe Live Cycle PDF. And there we found the best practice is just to actually print to PDF and then run everything through the tool, because otherwise you can't read it. So that's the sort of way to sort of quasi unlock those.
Hi,
yes,
Camilla, just have you tried extracting pages from an AM form? That might actually work. I'm happy to experiment with. We don't have to take time.
There are a lot of different. So all the tooling suggestions that we provide on the documentation, for the most part, are providing those that are sort of free or openly available to everyone. There would be a number of things that you could do if you were in Adobe Pro, for example, that would allow you to very easily do that. And so that should be clear. We don't want to be we're not dogmatic about what tools you're using here. We're just presenting the tools that we know everyone can access. So if you have some of these more powerful other tools that you have already paid for, then fine there, that works just as well.
And there is there's some videos on YouTube on how to navigate specifically on Acrobat. So perhaps we can just link those in the channel. If you do have access to Acrobat, then that's a way to edit the forms.
And when Maeve says videos on YouTube, she doesn't just mean like, you're talking about some of the AssemblyLine videos, right, Maeve?
Yeah, sorry, tutorials that we've created.
Yeah. So we, as part of the AssemblyLine project, have been working in the open and record just about everything we do. So we have daily recordings of meetings for going back for a long time. We stopped doing daily meetings, I think, at the end of the summer. So it's only been twice a week meeting since. I haven't done as good a job as keeping up with posting those videos, but we have recorded them. And so you can access those. Again, anything that I mention or someone mentions and you don't know where to find it, just ask in the teams and we can point you to it. And that's the primary means of communications. That's like the thing to say home. If you don't know where something is, just ask in teams. We can point you there. And then as people get familiar. All right, I think that's probably that. Should I do a quick list and then we hit our break? Is that our plan?
That is the plan. I just wanted to just check and see. I see some people were saying they were still having timeouts. Is that using the test server link, the second one we put on the chat?
And did you put that in both chats?
See if I can. I did put it on both chats. Yeah, I'm not experienced that. Is it even to get to the page or only when you upload a file? I'm curious.
So it's work. Yeah, it works. It identifies the fields and gives you that, or at least in my case, I get to see what fields it identified, but it just won't like finish processing.
So you can't get to the last screen.
Right.
To see the preview. Okay. Interesting. Well, I wouldn't be too concerned about that because really all you would see is just like the main purpose of that last screen is to let you kind of see what the fields look like in the PDF. The first screen where you get to see the fields is the most important one. It could be there's a bug there that we just didn't catch. Maybe something to do with the size of the PDF and how many people are doing it at once. But you're not missing an important part of the process if you don't get to that download.
Which is here we are building the train while we're driving it, or the plane while we're flying it.
You might have just run into a limit for how many people can assemble it at once. That's what I'm wondering.
All right. So I'm going to really quickly just tell you about something called the list taxonomy. Some of you might know about it as the NISME version 2 taxonomy. We bring it up here because when you go through the Weaver, you're going to be asked to label some things according to the list taxonomy. And so we wanted to be able to sort of tell you what that was all about. So I'm going to and so if you go out to taxonomy.legal, but I'm going to do a quick share screen. This is a taxonomy put together primarily by Margaret Hagan and her group over at the Legal Design Lab at Stanford. We've been working with them on a lot of projects related to it. The idea is to provide a common set of issue codes by which you can classify people's legal issues. And the motivation behind it is that by having a common set of issue codes, you can help facilitate interoperability of tools and discoverability of tools. And so what we'll be doing is whenever we make an interview, we ask you to tag with one of these, and there are hundreds of issues here, but there are 20 top level issues, which you can see are things like public benefits, working employment, estates, crime and prisons, health, etc. And you can drill down into these and you can find other issues, and they each have an issue code, which is this little thing here. You don't have to memorize those issue codes or do anything with that. This is just to give you an overview that this is a hierarchical taxonomy that attempts to classify a bunch of different legal issues. You may have your own taxonomy, and at some point it might make sense to do a mapping between yours and this. Or just a moment, Abby. It might make a sense to do more classification. A mapping between your classification. But here it's just, we want you to understand that there is this taxonomy, we're using it, and it's going to help us be able to help people discover these tools later on. So for example, on our front page of Court Forms Online, one of the things is we have a little natural language tool here where we can say, hey, my landlord kicked me out, right? And it will be able to pick up on that and know what's going on. And it does that by specifying list taxonomies. And so if we know what the list taxonomy of or label is of a form or what's implicated by it, then we can easily discover it and connect to it. We also think this will be helpful for discovery on the internet, for search engines, etc. And so it's just to let you know a little bit about that. I can share a link again in the Teams if you want to learn more about list. All we're doing right now is just those top level classifications. But eventually having finer level stuff might help you organizing your content, especially if you have voluminous amounts, and helping people discover that content. So that's a little something to say. I'm going to go get some more milk for Abby. Quentin, do you want to introduce the break and then tell people what they should do over that and to come back?
Yes. So during the break, we're going to take about a I think we could probably do a 10-minute break actually. 5 minutes is kind of impossible to actually get up from the computer and get back in time. So we'll do a 10-minute break. During the break, just try to see if you can make sure you were able to log on to the DocAssemble server. As we're seeing this kind of performance issue on the PDF checker, I'm wondering if we also might want to divide everybody's accounts in half on our test server and our development server to spread the load out. So I'm going to put a link to the test server for everybody. And if you haven't signed up yet for an account on our DocAssemble server or don't have access to that, why don't you click on that link? Go ahead and register, and then you will have an option to ask for developer permissions, and we will elevate you from there. Oops, that's the wrong link. Sorry about that. I put a, yes, thanks, Bryce has fixed it already. We'll do our best to make sure we're able to get everybody to run it at once. I think we'll be okay, but if we're not, that's something that we will load balance manually for now, like half of you on each server. Otherwise, we'll see everybody at about 12:15 and come back ready to use our Weaver for the first time.
And the real fun thing is when you leave today, you may have a silly little sample form that's working. So we're going to see if that, so that's the motivation. See you soon.
This is the curse of the live event is we're noticing some problems on our test server now. We are wondering if maybe there's a chance that when folks ran the PDF through the everyone was using the document tool at once. Maybe some people ended up with corrupt PDFs. I'm not sure. Hopefully that'll kind of even out. But the dev server seems to be up and running smoothly again. So we're going to give it a try and see how people can work through the wizard on the dev server. And if we have some trouble, we will enlist another server into the fight. At this point, you don't need to be actually logged into the server. You're going to be running a process that's all happens without you needing to be logged in. Okay. Yeah, I'm just checking to see. It still seems to be kind of a little slow on our test server. So that's something we're going to have to try to monitor and probably fix after the bootcamp is over. But we should be able to use the dev server for now. Bryce, one thing I might do is just install our package on another server as a backup. So do you want to get us started with introducing the Weaver and getting folks to be able to upload the PDF there? And then if you can, you would run the PDF through successfully last night. Why don't we put that PDF on the chat, the one that is like the pre-baked one, so people can run that through just in case that would also cause some problems.
Yes, I am trying to make sure I have all the right PDF.
I can take care of the chat bit.
Perfect, thanks. Okay.
This could be another place for us to get a brave volunteer actually as well, to actually run it live.
If anyone's interested in that. Otherwise, I can and should be able to handle that. Where could it be? Wait. Okay. Sorry. Okay, sorry. I do have the proper PDF now. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen of the Weaver. Cool. Okay, so yeah, so this is yeah, so this is the Weaver. After after you sort of checked out the PDF pre-flight tool, you'll end up with the right document. I think David posted it in Teams, and then sort of you'll come to the Weaver. And this first page is simply to check and or simply asking you to upload your file. Specifically, I want to note that you can we're doing this with the PDF, but the Weaver and sort of like the rest of this entire process works also with docx. With docx files, there's a slightly different notation. Like you're not going to be making fillable fields if you're working in docx. Instead, you would use something called Jinja, which we're not going to be able to touch on today, but just sort of wanted to let everyone know if more people are more comfortable with like on the fly developing with docx or just like prototyping forms with docx. We also this whole process sort of works very similar there as well. So go ahead and we can start. So yeah, so once you've uploaded the document, sort of we ask to, or we sort of just ask you about some general information about the interview. In this case, generally what you want to do whenever you upload the document is to make sure you have just a standard file name, since we'll take the file name and sort of make the title for everything. So you can see there's a lot of extra bootcamp copy filled, but in this case, the title of the form is pretty simply generic motion family law. And then we have a shorter name, which in this case can just be generic motion. And then it's sort of a place for a longer description, maybe just like a sentence or two. And then we can have, and then we sort of ask you a little bit more about sort of the categories of the forms, the allowed, and the allowed court. So for the categories of the forms, I believe this is a form that can be a part of an existing court case. And for allowed courts, this is, I think Quentin's mentioned before that we have a court finder for Massachusetts specifically that lets us sort of each form has sort of like knows which courts it can be filed in. Say if this form can be filed in family court or district court. I believe it's specifically in family court, but you can select multiple courts that the form can be filed in. And the sort of we've made it generic. So so if you still, when you're making your forms, even if you don't have like a court finder for your jurisdiction yet, you can still fill out other, which gives you just sort of like a various list of other courts you can have just separated by a comma. So space court is my go-to there. But yeah, let's just, for right now, so they have a few different options, but for right now, we can stick with family court. And for the categories, these are exactly the same list categories that David was talking about right before the break. And each of these will sort of correspond and actually add that the proper list tag to the interview. In this case, also is family. The unique label for this, or unique name for this interview, is sort of used as an internal, more of the internal name. But again, we'll probably want to take off any like additional parts or additional tags to the file that we added, like bootcamp or final or stuff like that. We can continue on. And so this is
it might just be good to pause for a second and make sure folks are able to keep up here. Is everyone, because I know we were having those server issues using the link that I just provided, are people able to be running through the Weaver right now? All right.
And I've just added an alternate link, which hopefully we don't overload. So we'll definitely be able to take this information and adjust the server capacity for next week. We thought we were pretty good based on like this being smaller than DocaCon over the summer, but I think our packages are a little bit more demanding apparently.
And then Quentin, do you want to just really quickly, for the partners we have who are working with sort of long haul around courts, you want to talk about how we might be able to help with that courts in the future?
Great. Well, yeah. So right now we built a pretty nice package that has information about, it's a database of all of the courts in Massachusetts. And we managed to build in some locating functionality as well that helps people figure out what court has jurisdiction over the address that they provide. And for those of you in other states, you have courts too. We're going to learn a lot, I think, over the next few weeks to months to figure out the best way to structure that so it works for every state in the country and or other countries as well. We don't think we want to just literally copy over our information and change the database data, because I think we can improve on our original design a little bit. So we're not quite ready for that yet, but I think we're going to iterate with the smallest scope and keep building from there. So we'll start out with maybe just like a spreadsheet that lists the addresses and information for each court as a starting place.
The takeaway is eventually, for those places that are sort of working on this more long haul, you should be able to gain that functionality that we have where you can put in an address and see the relevant courts. But for right now,
one thing you can do now is, this list of courts is hard-coded to Massachusetts, but if Bryce had clicked the other button, you could add your own list of courts right now, and that will be put into the file.
Yeah.
And you'll be, oh, we did already, sorry. You'll be able to add in the support on the back end later. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I'm going to run it now, but the functionality is not there. It'll work exactly the same.
Sorry, David's right. I did that wrong. It should be separated by commas, not new lines, which it says right there. So never mind. Cool. But cool. So
one thing that I might just might highlight here is, like, you might be wondering, well, what makes this tool different from something like Documate or Afterpattern? And I think that the biggest distinction here is we're creating a draft that then you can customize. We're not, and you'll see more like the ways that this looks like a graphical tool that you might have used before, like HotDocs, Documate, Afterpattern, or even A to J Author. But we're not doing the same thing. We're creating a draft that then you can customize and have the full DocAssemble power at the end. And so we're not focusing on reducing the scope of what you can do so that it will work both ways in the graphical interface.
Yes,
it'll make more sense later, probably.
Cool. So I haven't seen any Zoom questions. I always forget to use the screen share, but I'm
getting thumbs up from folks.
Cool.
What's the debug information?
Yeah, you can show that. That's
so the variable debug. This is sort of like a little bit low level. It's similar to what you would, get from the PDF checker. I think or the PDF pre-flight checker. We actually, I think, have a similar tab there. But this is essentially all of the raw. This is all of the like actual field information that we get from the PDF. And so the first one, like, sort of is just a like Python list print with just like the name of the field. I don't remember what the second part is. And then sort of like its location. And then the second part is it's text or it's a button. Sometimes they're signatures. It's sort of just like if you're running into some weird issues with your PDF, and it's not we're not recognizing some of the fields that you might expect to be recognized, then that's like, this is one way you can sort of figure out a little bit more about that.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. So we continue on. So we don't quite have any good examples of this in this form, but sort of one of the things we've added recently is being able to sort of to tell what other fields might be people. So in this form, we sort of stuck with user a lot, and I think we use plaintiff and petition, or plaintiff and defendant, and some places. But say if you had a completely different form, I think one of our examples is mailman, and we assume mailman is a person. They'll have an address and a phone number. Then the Weaver will sort of recognize that you're using those fields as a person, and so we'll sort of treat them you can treat them the exact same as user, and it makes it a little bit easier when you're later on when you're developing a docassemble interview. In this case, none of these motion isn't quite a user, and docket numbers isn't a user, and so we click none of the above. And also in this, and also we sort of need to define the user's role for this form. It could be either the plaintiff or the defendant sending in, since it's just a generic motion. So we can continue on. So this is sort of, sorry.
I just want to say, and that's relevant because we know about petitioners and respondents and plaintiffs and defendants, and have pre-built questions and stuff that will help get at their relationships to each other.
Yes. Good call. And yeah, and at this point, sort of we'll, like again, just reading through, they'll have a branded splash page, sort of like what David showed at the very beginning of, or sorry, Quentin showed at the very beginning when we were going through court forms online. And so in this case, we're sort of, you can change whatever sort of actionable item. So instead of just having the very specific or very detailed form name shown to the user or shown to whoever's like looking at your website, they might not understand what it means, and so you can sort of give a more actionable title, like sort of these examples. In this case, we can leave it pretty similar since it is generic. And here's another spot where we're sort of like Dave mentioned, we have some information about users and plaintiffs and defendants, and we'll sort of help you. This will help you sort of again on the programming, and we'll ask the right questions depending. So if we sort of know that there's at least always going to be one user, there could be multiple people in the same party or on the same side, I guess, filling it. So we know but there could be more, but there's at least going to be one. And again, with the sort of, that's probably similar with defendants and plaintiffs. Although in some forms you might have, there could be any number, including 0 plaintiffs if it's just a one-sided case, or I guess 0 defendants if it's just a one-sided case. Or you could have sort of exactly one user if you don't anticipate this to be filled by multiple users on the same side. In this screen is a bit of a doozy, but we can walk through it sort of individually. And so all of these fields are, or so this walks you through all of the fields that we've taken from the PDF and shows you and sort of gives you both what the prompt might be for that, or what the prompt to show the user and what that field type is. And also at the bottom, you can see all of these other fields that were included in the PDF, but we sort of automatically recognized of that, hey, we have questions for these in the AssemblyLine package, so you don't have to make your own questions. And so we're only going to deal with fields that we're not sure how to ask questions, and so it will help you write your own.
Bryce, if I could jump in for a minute. Sorry, I know I was distracted with it. Yeah, so as Bryce just said, so like this is your chance basically to give each of those fields that are in the interview some kind of prompt that the user is going to actually interact with on screen. So on the next screen, you'll get a chance to add like a whole dialogue level or screen level information. But here you're just giving each little piece of information a prompt, for example, for like a first name, which we're not asked about because it's a built-in field, you might just have, the prompt might just be as simple as first name, right? So it's that little bit of text that goes next to the input field that the user interacts with. And then the other thing to take a look at here is we've done a little bit of a guess based on the variable name you chose for what a good prompt might be. And then under field type, if Bryce clicks on one of those drop downs, you'll see you can choose from a couple of different types of fields. This is not every type of field that exists in DocAssemble, but it's the kind that currently the Weaver can handle for you. So text field is like a one-line input, area is multiple lines. And then you'll also see some of them were automatically guessed as yes, no. And yes, no is a checkbox field. And Jeff has asked about emergency. I guess let's take a look and see if we can figure out what's going on there. I believe that must be on the form for us to be asked about it, but I can't remember. here.
So emergency is the blank before motion 4. So
Right.
it's whether, so you sort of want a yes, no, but it's going to put in a text option instead.
Yeah, so this is a really good example of like where the prompt that you have in your draft might not be the ultimate way you end up deciding to have the user asked about it later. So we're going to leave it. It's a text field in the PDF. So that's what because we're going to put in some text there if it's an emergency. But you might want to never ask the user to define what that text is. But we can't deal with that yet. We're focusing on creating a draft, and we're going to iterate and improve it over time. So yeah, take a minute to like scroll through and make sense of it. You'll see like the label of the field, the variable name is what you see in bold. And underneath that is the information that you can change for each of those fields. Some of the variables, like the yes, no's, might not make as much sense. Yep, so Bryce is doing a good job of changing that prompt.
And just to drive home Quentin's earlier point, this is about getting a first draft of the form up that you're then going to be able to iterate. This is about saving time. This is about trying to have our cake and eat it too, right? So you're getting a little bit of the reduced friction of this graphical interface, but you're still going to have all the power of the code behind DocAssemble. So unlike those things that are built upon it, had to make choices about what things they do and don't surface to the developer, you'll still have access to everything in the end.
Mm-hmm. I think we could probably continue from here just to show some of the other features that the person might interact with on the next screen.
Capitalize BBO just to make that.
That's a good change. Yeah.
But yeah, so sort of once you go through and name and give the data or the type of all of those different fields, this is sort of what Quentin mentioned of now we're going to sort of actually screen by screen design the interview. And so let's say the best sort of at the top of it is sort of a good way to there are sort of a lot of different ways to design interviews and sort of what questions you ask first. Let's say in this case, we'll just ask questions about you, the user. So in this case, we can sort of ask some questions about you. And let's sort of, in this case, we can select all of the fields that we want to be answered on the screen. And so we want, the main idea here is that we want to be able to not show a individual screen for every single field that the user is going to fill out, because then that's just a lot of click-throughs that the user has to go. But we also don't want to have every single field on one screen, which is also overwhelming for someone who's filling this out. And so we can sort of split it off into a few different, let's sort of split it off.
That's probably a good chunk for now, Bryce. Yeah, I think that's a good first screen.
So in this case, we'll sort of say all these are there, and we can continue. And also, again, to sort of mention, a lot of these, like obviously wouldn't be final title names or final orders, but we can change all of this after as well. So let's say the next name is or the next screen should be sort of what the actual motion is about. So what is your request? Which we can sort of include the user request. For now, we can sort of put the whether or not emergency and motion name is there, since those are all sort of related information, but we'll likely edit those out by the end so they aren't shown. Continue, make another screen. And we sort of keep going like this screen by screen until we've used all of the fields that didn't have questions already. And so in this case, we can sort of get all the information about the hearing, as well as the BBO number, which would be the sort of like identification number for a lawyer if there was one involved. And at this point, I believe we're done. And so we've sort of gone screen by screen and designed the whole interview. And now we've gotten to the point where we've wrapped it up. And we will be able to download this package and have a runnable DocAssemble interview that fills out that PDF. I think this is probably a good point to make sure everyone else has, or all of y'all have sort of follow along and haven't run into any issues. And if you have, feel free to speak up.
And Bryce, you might also want to just download that package and throw that on the chat as well for anyone who had any difficulties in running Weaver.
Good call.
And do you end with an add continue button or just end once you've used all your fields?
So you'll end once you used all your fields. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually.
Yeah, that's a good
show
thing for us to explain. So I think, Jeff, you're picking up on, like, you saw that continue button field on the bottom. So if we click back, we could explain what that means a little bit. It's kind of esoteric, and there's not, so click on the help icon, it explains it a little bit more. Basically, what that does, so normally in DocAssemble, each screen is triggered by a variable on the screen is needed. It doesn't have, the screen itself doesn't have a label. The continue button field is a way to make sure you call a particular screen rather than calling the variable that the screen needs. You don't normally need to do that. We wanted to leave that option in for folks to do in the wizard, but it's kind of one of those more advanced features you won't likely want to experiment with now. Makes sense. And actually, was earlier today writing up some notes that will help explain a little bit more like what that is. One time you might want to use it as if all of the fields on the screen are optional. So it doesn't really make sense to say, I'm going to trigger the person's maiden name if they don't necessarily have one, right? Like you want to trigger the screen that asks them if they have a maiden name and not whether they have, the maiden name wouldn't be a sensible field to ask about in your interview itself. So that is kind of like the example of when you would maybe use it if it's all optional fields on that screen.
And this is really some stuff that will be covered next week around like question ordering and how DocAssemble figures out what to show when.
When I said, yeah, and like one thing that we said is like we're building the train as we go along. Actually, we have some nice code here that will let you rearrange the order of the questions. So you don't just go to the end where we just were. It will allow you to rearrange the order and edit the questions a little bit more. That we're not quite ready. We haven't tested enough to make sure that we're ready to include it. But even by next week, you might be able to interact with that piece of code. And then on this download screen here, you'll see you have two options. One is to download the YAML file. If you've done DocAssemble development before, you're probably very familiar with that. That's kind of like the interview script. It's where all of the instructions that control what screens show up on the website are contained. And you also have this option to download a package. Right now, all that package does is it bundles together your template and the interview file in one go. So it makes it easier for you to upload it on the server to continue editing it. But over time, we might be adding more files there that you could also customize. Things like a next step instructions page is something that is being developed now. So you might start out with a template of, hey, my interview is ready to go. And it even has the cover page ready to go for me to customize that explains what the user does when they download the completed form. So that is the main difference right now. You probably only want to ever download the package once. Hey, maybe you ran your form through the wizard twice and you would like to download the YAML file that you updated and not have to re-download the template because that didn't change. So at this point, you should click the download package link, but probably, and you should get a zip file that contains a DocAssemble package.
Mm-hmm. And if for some reason you weren't able to, like something sort of went wrong or there's some server issues, again, I've posted the DocAssemble or the DocAssemble package that I got from my interview in the bootcamp Slack, or sorry, Teams.
Might also, another question that came up was the includes that this file has. So you won't be able to immediately run it on your server, the file that is generated here, because there are some packages that need to be included for those files to run.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, so I think that was just Michael might be the only person who has a DocAssemble server right now, but for all of you, you can run this on our DocAssemble server right away. So that's what we're going to try to do now. Yeah, we're going to try to have everybody switch over to logging into their DocAssemble account. And one of us on our team can monitor the account, the chat, to see if anyone needs to have their DocAssemble account activated. Or if they haven't received an invitation, ask for us to do that now. but switch over to your DocAssemble playground. If we have a volunteer who wants to share their screen, this is a chance for us to do that too.
So when we say the playground, it means you log in and you click up on your email on the top right there and click on the button.
I might call on someone who I know has their server set up to do this with us. So if we don't get a volunteer. Well, how about this? Joelle, can I call on you to share your screen, since I know Joelle's one of our students who's been doing some great work in the lab, if you don't mind being put on the spot.
Yep, so the playground?
Yes. So Joelle is in the DocAssemble playground, and can you just show us, Joelle, how you got to that, just from the login, by clicking on your name and showing us where the menu option is for the playground. So if you are logged into the server and your account's been given developer rights, you should see playground as one of the options there when you click on your email address. So that's what Joelle has done to get to this window. I see at least one person needs an invitation. Allison, if you include your email on the chat, we can do that. Or if you wanted to start by just signing up on the server. Okay, I see the email now. Thanks. And then Allison, Joelle, take us to where you upload a package and maybe explain what that is. What people are doing when they do that.
So after you guys go through the Weaver, the last thing is that you get a package. So you download that package. When you go into folders up here, you could just click on packages. You can upload that package, whatever it is. I haven't gone through it and download this specific one, but I can.
Bryce did dump that outloaded onto the chat, so you could grab it there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you're in the bootcamp teams, if not, I should be able to add it. There we go. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. So just because it's faster. So Allison, looks like you have an account on the server already. I might be able to try to reset your invitation. And Jen, I'm going to add your account now.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, you might have to just elevate your privilege. Let me check that.
So Joelle, that's probably in your downloads now, and you can access that.
Oh, I don't think. Sorry, guys. I've had really slow. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm going to put this onto my desktop. Here we go.
And Lori, I'm going to activate your account with developer privileges. Allison, I just reset. I've sent you a new email invite, so hopefully that will let you log in.
And so after you see that green box that Joelle's seeing, it's been uploaded to the program. If you made a change like she did with the package name, then you do want to scroll down to the bottom and hit save. But otherwise,
I believe you need to remove the spaces from the package name. It's alphanumeric, so spaces don't do that.
Save.
And then if she has to go back over to her playground, it should be there now. So you can either do back to playground at the button at the far bottom, or you could have used the toolbar up at the top. And now she can go over and she's mixed it in with a bunch of her other stuff. So what do we call it? Generic and then motion. So you could also create you can create individual playgrounds so that you don't have to put everything in one spot. but all of you are just going to have this one thing in there to begin with. So now you have that there. And now if we click run, we will see what our output was.
And also clarified, we are sort of, I think, brushing over a bit of all of the features of the playground. I think we're definitely going to go into those a little bit more next week when we start actually editing the interview file in a bit more depth.
Yeah, this is just to show that the output has produced something. So here is what your form looks like right now. Again, this is not your finished form by any means, but this is the sort of first draft that the Weaver was able to create. So Joel, if you just sort of run through them, we can just throw gobbledygook in. You'll notice that some of these questions, it's going to ask about the posture of the case or something. It's asking those because it's inferring things because you had plaintiff and other variables in there. And so you're going to be able to leverage some of that past knowledge. Some of the stuff you see here is going to need more context, right? So we didn't ever really provide much context around that emergency variable we talked about. On these motion names or whatnot. So for now, just go ahead and you can just throw in placeholder text, Joel. So just, yeah.
And we're definitely going to increase the server capacity we have next week, everybody. So, and now we're going to see some of the questions that weren't pre-written, I think. If we get past the spinning wheel of death here, which we should soon. There we go. Oh, we're still on some of the custom questions. Actually, I was wrong.
So while we're waiting on the spinning wheel of death for a moment, I've run mine and it's throwing a syntax error, which is funny because it went through everything else all right. Okay. So it's a code block line 11 syntax error, if that.
Yeah, this will be a great thing for us to take a look at. Jack, I'm going to say we're almost at the end of Joel's form, so let's just show people how this runs, and then let's take a minute to troubleshoot the problem that you ran into. So you can see here is the court selector, and this would, I can't remember what address that you provided, Joel. I didn't have a chance to see that. If you'd provided an address in Massachusetts, that was a real address, it should show here. And it might actually just be the order.
So it just prompted me.
Didn't ask for an address, maybe yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the interview asked for an address. So
that's the reason. Okay.
Might be a thing.
Yeah, so it actually could use the address to narrow down that list of courts even more for Joelle if we had done that.
And the joy of live demos.
But hopefully you can start to see like how much time we've saved, like everything that you've gotten just from what we answered in the Weaver itself. Point out a couple of things going on here on the screen. So one is you see here the ID. Try refreshing, Joel, see if we can get it to run again without the timeout. My mother-in-law just got her vaccine appointment this morning, and it was the same experience. 8 a.m., everybody was trying to sign up at once for a vaccine. It was about an hour until we were able to do it because all of the websites were timed out.
It's amazing the difference between 50 folks doing this and our classes, which are a bit smaller.
Absolutely. Okay. So here's one of those built-in questions. Actually, as we've been playing around with this, I was realizing we were going to rewrite this one so it's a little bit clearer for some of these built-in questions. And something else that we had turned on for our first packages, which we have kind of disabled as we're trying to make things more flexible, is actually asking the user like if they're the plaintiff.
Why don't you do 120 Tremont there? That way we get a real address. That's the address of the law school for those folks who aren't here.
So we'll just see the download. Okay, so here's that preview screen that we saw earlier for the CDC form. And if we click next, we get that signature screen. We can just choose sign on the computer for now.
You can text to a phone, which is super cool.
And then here's the new appearance of the download screen that I talked about, which we're still iterating on a little bit, but I think it's a little bit cleaner than that look that you saw in the CDC form. Okay, and then Joelle could actually email to somebody. It's kind of pre-filled in with her account, but and she could include, if this were a Word document, she'd be able to get it as a PDF and as a Word document. If she checked that box where it says include an editable copy, it doesn't really make a difference for a PDF. So that's it. That's the basics. So I want to just take a second to say first, for next week, we want you to try running one of your own forms through the process of labeling and putting it through the Weaver, and just experiment with that. And if you have questions about what we did today or about the process when you're doing that, use the Teams channel to ask for help. We're happy to help guide you and help solve any problems that you ran into along the way. And now I'd like to take a minute. Jack, thanks for sharing the error message you ran into. Let's see if we can try to help you solve that one live in our last few minutes.
I am so sneaky. I figured out exactly what the problem was.
Oh, well, then we know we can solve it. That's great. Let's try to recreate the problem and then solve it again.
Okay, it's a problem that probably no one else is going to run into because I created the error myself by being silly. And by
Do you want to share your screen, Jack, before we go too much into it?
Okay. I can, let me try and get back to where I was so I can actually show you exactly what I did that was silly. I cannot get back there because I already fixed it. I now have the interview working. So there is that. I fixed it in the code in the playground.
All right. Well, I guess you can summarize for us what you did.
Yeah, so I can tell you exactly what I did. In the field where we were able to add additional courts that this form could be submitted to, I decided to be a little funny and say we could submit this to Judge Judy's courtroom. And in doing so, I used an apostrophe. And that was what created the syntax error. When I went back in the code and removed the syntax error in the YAML file from the playground, fixed my syntax error, everything ran just fine.
Oh, awesome. So that actually sounds like something we should probably strip out in the Weaver, and we're gonna make a bug report for that. I see Bryce put a thumbs up. So great, I'm really glad you found that bug. We do have a few minutes for other questions people have.
And I also think it's just, this is a lot. I mean, I'm sure we're not sure where everyone's coming from. I think some people were very much like, let me just see what this is all about. And some people were like, oh, I've been working with DocAssemble for a while. So we have a diversity of audience. And I just want to underline the point, and maybe saying it the fifth time will really do that, is that this is about getting an on-ramp to the community, not about giving you everything you need to know right out of the gate. If we could do that, we wouldn't have the same power that we think this tooling and these processes have. We were able to do stuff that normally would have, using other toolings, might have taken a year or more. We were able to do in just a matter of months using sort of the flexibility that this provides. So just want to hold out that promise of exciting things you can do, and then also remind you that it's okay if only 20% of this is making sense. That's why we have the community there for you to be able to access.
And I'll even broaden it a little bit more, even if you just have a comment or impression or idea or inspiration that you want to share, or an invitation to connect with somebody in the last couple minutes, because I know that's the one artificial part of us doing this remote that was a little harder.
We did have our German folks exchange emails, so that's great.
Great. Yeah, and there was a question in the chat about the video. Absolutely, we're going to post that as soon as we can.
Although I've realized Joelle released her email address inadvertently a couple times on there, so I'm going to have to figure out how to go through and sanitize some of that.
Okay. So by the end of tomorrow, I would say we could probably get it up. Does that?
I think we can do something, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just so excited to have so many folks join us from all over the world. It's been great to meet with you all, and we are going to be on the Teams channel. You can see a couple of our friendly students who are here too, and we'll enlist them to help answer some questions too, and looking forward to seeing you all over the next week. Again, Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, that is another chance to ask some questions live, and that's an every week thing. That's not just during the boot camp. And that Zoom link we'll share on the Teams. Different link, but also on Zoom.
And is there a Zoom meeting on Tuesday, or is it just with Teams?
It's on Zoom. There's no Teams. Well, I mean, I guess you can still use Teams, but it's going to be on Zoom. That will do the live question and answer.
Is it the same link?
It is a different link, different Zoom link.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a persistent link for the pre-existing team. So this is a different link we've used for the bootcamp. But you all are welcome to participate as part of the larger AssemblyLine team.
Yeah, I believe most people have, like, at least whenever I sent out the Zoom link to this Zoom link to everyone, I included some information about like week 0, and I think there was a link in there as well to the Tuesdays Zoom. So y'all should all have access to it. If you can't find it or anything else, just feel free to ping one of us and ask for it again.
Or ask for it in the main team channel, because everyone will benefit from anything that you have to ask, I'm sure. Yeah, and don't get surprised if now when you go and you try to run this on your own form, you run into like 500 questions, and you are not bothering us by asking those questions. That is, it might take us a while to get through them if there are 500, but that is why we are here.
Okay, so I am happy to stick around for a little while. Maybe this is a good time for us to turn off the recording just in case that was a blocker for anybody asking a question.